That's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned is if you're not going against the grain, you're probably losing. In more traditional religious views was, I think they a lot of times like cut God short of what he can do. When the Bible says, ask and ye shall receive, all of a sudden they want to be like, well, that's not specific. They don't actually mean that. And I'm like, well, why not? So that was kind of where that questioning comes in, and, having that faith and kind of dreaming bigger than like what your traditional Christian might think.
I've walked through fire with shadows on my heels. Scars turned to stories that taught me to feel. Lost in the silence, found in the flame. Now wear my battle cry without shame. This isn't the end, it's where I begin. A soul that remembers the fire within.
Welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, brought to you by Praxis 33. I'm your host, Daryl Snow. Let's dive in. Every once in a while when I do this show, I come across some people that I'm really impressed with and fascinated by. And today, my guest is no different. Mike Tharp is going to join me. Mike is a teacher who wants to help others master their mindset and learn financial literacy to manifest their future the way they want. And Mike lives life large and is excited when he can help others do the same. And I'm excited to have him join us today. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Definitely, Daryl. Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we haven't known each other long. We've been introduced through a crypto project that we both got involved in, Texit Mining, Texit Coin. But I got to looking into who you are and what you do. And first off, what impressed me was the fact that you are just a natural born leader. Like in the group that we were introduced in, you just kind of stepped up and helped people regardless of where they were in their own understanding. And so when I got to looking at you, I'm like, wow, he's really charismatic. He's someone who really just wants to help others get the best out of themselves. What made you get your EDU? Because you have your master's in education. So what made you go that route? Because, I used to help people get their doctorate degree, and I understand, what education takes. So just wanting to be in education alone is a bold step. What led you in that direction?
Well, I think I get a lot of my leadership qualities from playing sports. I was really into basketball and soccer in high school. My dad was a teacher. He taught English and Spanish for 33 years or so. And so, I got to my sophomore year of college and it was kind of like, I guess I got to decide what I'm going to do. I've always loved history. So I got my undergrad in like a social studies, history, government economics from Cedarville University near Dayton, Ohio. And graduated in 2001. And as we all know, the 9/11 hit. And so all the teachers' pensions and retirement funds went down, and history is a really hard subject to get into anyways. PE and history are, the hard ones, even when you're a coach. So just kind of was a server, substitute teacher. I was like, well, I guess if I'm going to be able to get a job, I got to go back and get my master's, and I got it in special education, since that's obviously always in demand because it's a very tough field. So even before I finished my master's, I got a job in Grand Rapids Public. That kind of started my teaching career. So I guess just always helping people. I have kind of a passion for truth. So I just enjoy, especially when it comes to history. So I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Now, you're currently in Michigan. Did you grow up in that area? Was that your starting point?
Yeah, I was born on the east side in like Metro Detroit, and then we moved to a really small city called Carson City, where I was there most of my elementary and high school career. And then I've kind of been in the Grand Rapids area for the last 15 years or so.
Do you come from a big family or a small family?
Just pretty typical. I just me and my one sister. My dad had six brothers and sisters, and my mom just had a brother. So just
Yeah.
the average two kids
Two
growing
kids,
up.
two jobs.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
it.
Now, how old were you when you left Detroit?
Six.
Okay. So I grew up on the streets of Minneapolis till I was 9. And the parts of Minneapolis that I grew up in were not particularly nice. I actually had to carry a knife to kindergarten, you know. Uh, do you remember much of Detroit? Because that
Yeah,
has a connotation like Detroit.
yeah. Well, I said Metro Detroit. It's technically Madison Heights, so it was like I would say like lowerish class working neighborhood. I do remember getting just randomly some kid threw a rock at me, and I still have a little thing on my nose from it when I was like 5. I remember that. And running for my life a few times, but it was just kind of like your typical bullying thing. It wasn't like I was uh, running from a bunch of gangbangers for my life or anything.
Yeah. So when you moved to the new city, growing up, were you one of those rebel? Because I said in your intro, you live life large, and you do. And I have, some. I have some examples of what that looks like today. Like this is this is Mike Tharp living life large, right? Did you do a lot of that as a child? Were you bold and brash as a kid, or did you kind of grow into that?
I guess I would say kind of early I developed to not really care what other people think and to go against the grain and to do what you want, and not to kind of like fall into the conformity that we see in our culture and society. I went to smaller Christian schools my whole life. So I grew up going to the Baptist church. So I was in a very small. The high school I was in, I was going to graduate with 4 students. I think there was less than 50 in the entire high school. And so, like, some people might think, oh, well, that means you're going to like not be, out there or more introverted. But for me, it was kind of like I was a big fish in a small pond. And so I just kind of kept that same mentality when I went to college, when I got into my, work career or whatever, is to just kind of always think positive, always think big. Don't worry about what everyone else thinks. Follow your passion, do what you want to do. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned is if you're not going against the grain, you're probably losing, because you're just basically following the herd.
That as a young man and as a child, and even now as an adult, that takes a lot of really disciplined intestinal fortitude to live the life the way you want it to live and not be dissuaded by the noise that's around you. Was that something that was instilled by your parents, or did you just kind of like that's just how you were going to be?
I think it's actually the opposite of my parents, like specifically my dad. My dad is like very safe, very much like go with the flow of what everyone else is doing. Like he thinks buying gold and silver is just too extreme, even with the massive historical, significance we have in gold and silver holding their value. But like, no Bitcoin, no crypto. He's like, put it in a 401k uh, guy. So I think it was kind of the opposite of that, of growing up in like a very traditional conservative household. It was kind of like I just started questioning everything. And then I just, whether it was history or religion, politics, business, finances, I just had to question everything. That was kind of, I would say, even like if you went back and asked my teachers, they would probably say the same thing.
That's the thing that I find people in a strict religious household, they
Oh yeah.
they tend to go two ways. They tend to either go super uber zealot religious, or they go not necessarily anti-religion, but certainly questioning, the things around them. So it seems like that's the path that you took. Were you rebellious as a teenager? Were you
Nope.
so the big and bold didn't go as far as the rebellion, it just the ideation.
Yeah, it was just again, just questioning and wanting to know why, we believe these things or we're supposed to do this or we're supposed to do that. Never really had any big, you know, going out on a limb or anything like that.
So may I ask now, are you pretty connected with God or spirit or however you phrase it, or did you kind of go your own path?
So I wouldn't say like I kind of hold to a lot of the more traditional beliefs that like, your typical Baptist would, which I mean has changed drastically in my life, from the 80s to now of what even a Baptist is and what they think, who knows. Couldn't really tell you. Um, I was pretty heavily influenced by Rob Bell, who was the pastor at Mars Hill. He's kind of written some big books and done some things kind of outside of the church. So I think I learned a lot from him. One of my favorite books is also Richard Rohr, Falling Upward. He's a Jesuit priest. He's technically Catholic, but kind of critiques the Catholic Church a lot. And I would say probably my biggest one was like discovering Neville Goddard and how he kind of, at least for me, brought together my traditional beliefs I'd been taught with the Bible with kind of more of a positive thinking manifestation and, how we can create our own reality and kind of not doubting or questioning what God can do for us. Because that's kind of what I found in more traditional religious views was I think they a lot of times like cut God short of what he can do. When the Bible says, ask and ye shall receive, you know, all of a sudden they want to be like, well, that's not specific. That's not they don't actually mean that. And I'm like, well, why not? So that was kind of where that questioning comes in and, having that faith and kind of dreaming bigger than like what your traditional uh, Christian might think.
It is fascinating to me because I consider myself a Reformed Catholic. My mom and grandparents were uber devout Catholicism, and my stepdad, who was my dad, is evangelical. So I had mass on Saturdays and church on Sundays, and I got to learn the difference. And Catholicism to me was always about ritual and adhering to whatever the pastor said, not necessarily what God was saying, and so that conflict between it became very evident as a young boy. And as I got old enough to choose, I chose God over religion. And I even in high school wrote a paper that religion was the worst thing to happen to God, you
Right.
know. So it's interesting that you follow the doctrine of, and questioning, I think, is part of natural, like the Bible. Like people questioned the authority of the
Right.
religious, right? When you come across people who push back on that with you, you know, because I'm always fascinated by the people who have a problem with money when money is a gift that God gives us. And he says, in faith, I will give you more. I will take and tamp down and tenfold it. Well, are you tamp downing and folding zero? Or are you tamp down and folding like a lot? Like,
Right.
so when people give you that biblical pushback, what do you say to those folks?
Well, I usually just go to different scripture because people kind of have they like to pick and choose and focus on like these two verses and ignore these three verses. So typically it's just more of that of kind of like answering a question with a question and kind of looking at, like you said. I always ask myself that question of how Jesus would respond to the Pharisees. Um, that's kind of the line of thinking and questioning I had growing up in like a very religious household and church and school and stuff is if somebody told us to Jesus, which you have a lot of examples of that in the New Testament, how would he respond to them? Like what were the questions that he would ask them?
Yeah, and I
And
think
are you familiar with Richard Rohr at all?
no, but I'm going
Okay.
to be because I'm fascinated by people who can bring understanding. I think one of the problems that people have with the Bible, it's not linear. Like, so they, what you're reading in this chapter doesn't translate to, it's not like a regular book where it's just linear. So you kind of have to know, and that's where I think your history helps you, is the history of what's going on at that time. But also, like you said, people want to pick and choose their references, So anytime I can find someone who can explain biblical principles in a fashion that isn't as much of picking and choosing, but deciphering, religious scholars all differ on different parts of what the Bible actually says. So, you know, we know that it's God's word to us, but we're not supposed to pick and choose which phrases we, agree with or disagree with. So I appreciate your insight to that. What is his stance?
So I was just going to add, he really gave me a good way to understand this. So he talks about how there's two stages of life. And in the beginning stages, like we need rules and parameters. And, when it comes to Catholicism, rituals. And of course, being Baptist, we were taught like rituals are bad because you're just doing it because it's a ritual. Um, but like, so like typically like when people kind of break out of that religious mindset, then they want to go back and nitpick everything about the religion or whatever, more of a rules based life. And so Rohr puts it really into perspective that those things are needed, especially when you're younger and you're learning things, you need to protect yourself. And so they're not bad things. So wherever you are in your spiritual journey, maybe, you are kind of realize like religion's the worst thing that happened to God, but I think it still serves its purpose, right? And then in your second stage of life, it's kind of where it's more the freedom of Christ, right? That you've kind of gone through, you've learned the ropes, right? You understand the basics, and now you're living in liberty through Christ. And so he says a lot of times that happens like from a big event in your life. It could be, a death, a big tragedy, a divorce, losing a child, something like that. And you kind of see that happen over and over again with people on their spiritual journey is a lot of people don't change and get to that second stage of life if they don't go through some sort of travesty or traumatic event.
That makes perfect sense, especially with the travesty and events I've seen in my life and my wife's life. We've both had a lifelong connection with God, but through those trials is when we deepened our faith and our walk with God. That's when we really leaned into the faith and what God actually gives and provides us. So I do want to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick this up because I love where you've taken your journey in regard to what we've talked about already. We'll be right back.
So, when did you realize the noise in your head wasn't actually your voice? When I noticed every thought sounded borrowed. Fear, pressure, old scripts, just running on repeat. That's why I listen to Breakthrough Radio. Scripture, truth, conversations that actually reset the way you think. Breakthrough Radio, because what you hear shapes who you become. Listen daily.
Welcome back to the show. We're with Mike Tharp today, and we've so far been covering the early part of his life, but we're talking about the Bible and religion. But there's something that you brought up about money that I really think is biblical, and that is that we are supposed to be wealthy. Like, I've always ascertained, if I want to do something nice for you, if I want to go into any restaurant and buy everyone a meal, I can't do it if I don't have money. I have to have money, right? But you've taken your education a little further into money, and you have this quote. Hi, I'd like a wake up call. They print money out of nothing, devalue your savings with inflation, then tax you for using it. The whole system is built to exploit you. Is that your quote, or did you come across that somewhere?
I think I kind of borrowed it, but that's what we talk about a lot with the runners, and it really just blows my mind again that we have such division in our country, and Ricardo, my partner in crime, always says, public enemy number one is the Federal Reserve, and no matter what we believe when it comes to politics, if people could understand that there's a private banking cartel that is charging us interest as they create dollars out of thin air and give them to the wealthy, the elite, and rich first. And by the time it gets to us, the inflation has happened, the value of that dollar has fallen, yet most people continue to work for dollars and save in dollars, which is why we see now, just houses aren't affordable. You know, the getting married and having a home by 30 has fallen, I think, from like 70% to like 20% these days. And it's literally just because of inflation. Like, you can have all the economic theories of Republican and Democrats, high tax, low tax, welfare. In the end, until we've solved this problem of a debt-based fiat monetary system, nothing fundamentally is going to change.
I think this is where your love for history, plays into your love for acquiring wealth and helping others do the same. Because unless you actually start looking into what the Federal Reserve is or what it was, you just think, most of us aren't history buffs. So we just think, oh, well, this is just how it always was. And we don't
Right.
realize, the history behind it. Can you talk a little bit to the history? Because you're very versed in it.
Well, let's see. I could probably go a long time in this, but one thing, keep in mind, of course, is gold and silver have been money for thousands of years. Um, Typically, it was about a 15-to-1 ratio, maybe 20-to-1, meaning 1 ounce of gold was worth about 15 or 20 ounces of silver. And it was that way for thousands of years. And if you want to do some research, there's something called the crime of 1872, I believe. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. Yes. So basically, this is when they try to take silver away from being money. And it was like, typically, it was like some bill on, near a holiday, and it was late at night, and they just kind of pushed it through. Um, but I basically believe and teach that silver has been severely suppressed since 1872. So we're talking about 150 plus years of price suppression that we're finally just getting to see a little bit of a true fair market. We're still not there yet, but silver's at in the 90s today. And I think the gold to silver ratio is around 60 right now. So again, 15 to 20 for thousands and thousands of years. The government gets involved. We have Chase Bank rigging the silver market, and now it was like 90-to-1, 80 to 90-to-1 when I was talking about silver a lot and buying a lot of silver and teaching people how to do the same. And then obviously, as we get into the Great Depression, and they kind of force people to turn in their gold. Now, most people didn't turn in their gold. Like, this would be like very few people, because a lot of people back then still were like, you're not getting my gold, I don't trust the government. But anyways, they buy the gold at $20 and right away reprice it to almost $40, right? And then, of course, we go off our dollar's kind of backed by gold up until 1972. And whenever you look at anything economically, always remember that we went completely off the gold standard, completely to fiat fake monopoly money in 1972. And if you look at almost every problem in America or the world, it comes back to 1970, which I just realized the crime of 1872 and then going off the gold window was 100 years apart. I had never realized that. But like if you look at divorce, poverty, housing increases, the debt, everything starts and just completely changes in 1972.
And right now, I know that you're pretty diverse. This is some of the things that you invest in. You got the gold, the silver, the crypto. Like you are very diversified in what you do. And I want to run through these iterations of your company. This is one of the early ones. I hope I have these in the order. I tried to grab them in order, but this is one of the first iterations of your company, and then you kind of went, this little route to help with financial literacy. Then you went, more along this line. And by the way, as a graphic designer, I like the way you did your MT in the way of a Spartan helmet. That's pretty awesome. And then now you're at this one, which is what you talked about with the runners. But through each one of them, your foundation has been the same: the mindset, the wealth teaching, and the health. So what is this iteration with the runners? Because I know you've mentioned that a couple times.
Yeah, so the runners is just kind of an organic movement that happened. Ricardo Hamilton, aka Mims, him and I just kind of met randomly online, and we had a lot of the same beliefs. He would talk about inflation and the Federal Reserve. He was big into gold. I was buying more silver then. And then when COVID hit and, silver went down to $14, he just reached out to me and he said, "Hey, Mike, where are you getting your silver from?" And I told him a company I'm still using today. So we kind of started working together. It has an affiliate model to it. And then we really blew up another gold and silver company that September of 2020. Really took it global and brought in I think we had over 10,000 people on our team. And so, Ricardo would just say, some will, some won't. So what? Run with the runners, find out who wants to change their life, find out who's ready to take this seriously, who's ready to, build a business in precious metals and run with those people. And so, we did a couple 90-day runs and just kept marketing, advertising it, and had a lot of success with that. And of course, that's, I just kind of fell into network marketing. Even though I'm from Grand Rapids, where Amway is, I had never done it. I didn't really know about it. So I guess I wasn't caught up in that whole pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme that like most people get. Like they can't imagine that you can make money without touching a product, by just marketing it. So I was very fortunate and blessed to kind of fall into that, which eventually, ends up to me retiring from teaching at 40.
So you're retired and you do investing full time?
Yep. So just however I want to do it, whether it's through courses, one-on-ones, marketing different affiliate programs that I think are valuable to people. Just finding, things that work, make sure they work for me so I can help, other people have that same success.
And through it all, what I love about you from the short period of time I've gotten to, view you from a 300-foot level, you're very, like I said, leadership oriented. So you help enormous amounts of people without, expectation to what it does back for you. But you also are very like you're wearing a medallion today with the flag, right? You're very love of this country. You're very which this country was founded on a, religion, theological basis. So you still intertwine your connection with God, your love of country, and then not relying on the government to do right by you. And at 40, I mean, I'm 61. At 40, that's unheard of these days, you know? So kudos, first off. Secondly, how do you feel or how do you find in your own life that all three of those intertwine?
So obviously, I think I'm more appreciative and sometimes critical of America because I understand history. So I know what it's like in other countries. I like to talk to, I have a pretty international team, travel a lot. So I like to talk to people as well. But I guess it's just knowing, even though it's not perfect, even though we're violating a lot of our key constitutional principles today, still the best framework I think we've had on this world. And kind of going back to Reagan's, you know, we're one generation away from losing freedom, and I've seen that happen so many times in through history that I know it can happen here. So that kind of wants me to even go harder to try to wake people up and educate them about preserving those liberties. And I mean, same thing, like once you understand the mass toll war has had, the sacrifices so many people have made, I guess it just makes it real for me or real to me, when I see these things happening, when I see our rights and liberties being taken away, when I see people falling for Marxism and critical race theory and or critical Marxism, whatever you want to call it. And I was calling this out like 15, 16 years ago when even like people on the right thought I was crazy. I mean, I would be telling my parents about the Frankfurt School starting in Germany, and then they came over after World War II, infiltrated the universities in the 60s. And then the 80s, they really just let it out of the bag with critical race theory. And, people just thought I was crazy. I'm making this up. Oh, it's conspiracy theory. And now there's really no arguing it anymore. I mean, they're basically admitting it openly. They use the nicer term socialist, but it's basically just cultural Marxism that has captured the universities and pretty much all the major institutions that we that are in our country right now. So that's kind of the thing I'm passionate about the most right now, because I know exactly their plan and they're pretty much being successful. And I saw that happen in education as well. And if you don't have those institutions, I mean, I don't care if you're on the right or even if you're somewhat religious, spiritual, those things to the left, the real Marxist left, must be destroyed. That's kind of their number one thing: destroy the family, destroy God and the church, and always create havoc to propel us towards that revolution that they so desperately want.
I find a correlation to when they started taking some of the what are now deemed religious activities out of schools. You can no longer say a prayer in school. You can't even say the Pledge of Allegiance in many of the schools today. Also, it became you can't say Merry Christmas. You have to say Happy Holidays, and like they PC corrected it so far that it destroyed any of the basis that was there. Do you, in your view, see any way of some of that coming back so that it doesn't massively crumble under us?
I mean, I think we should be fighting for that and hoping and praying for that. I'm a little more positive about that happening than I was, maybe 10 years ago. Well, not perfect. I think Donald Trump has been a big change in that, of him actually calling out another term they use is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really, it's just Marxism. Like almost everything that we know that's evil is just Marxism, right? They just put different makeup on it. They try to hide it. But in the end, it just turns out to be Marxism. So everything that you just described, like that was the first term people used was, well, that's politically incorrect, right? That was just Marxism trying to use peer pressure or social pressure to get those things out of our, everyday nomenclature that people will be using, because you want to um, get rid of the old guard. It's the same thing that China did. Is anything old needs to be demonized, and um, to I can't imagine being a student today. I saw 2 videos last week of students being punched for being pro ICE or pro law enforcement, which is just crazy that we've come to this point where saying I believe in a border and I want to defend it is, gets you beat up in a public high school in America these days.
Well, and sadly, it gets you ostracized in anything that we do. Like social media is no longer social. People hide behind their keyboard and their 30-second sound bites for their knowledge. They don't do their own research to go deep enough to find the actual truth. They rely on these 30-second clips for their knowledge and information. And then they go out there as if that's their own thought and their own ideation, and tout it. And they don't have the critical thinking anymore. I think critical thinking has, as much as people get away from religion and their spiritual beliefs and their connection to God, they lose their critical thinking and start social thinking, and then it becomes chaos. My dad said when he was alive that we haven't had a true president since they assassinated Kennedy. Every other president since that time has been a puppet for whatever is going on behind the scenes. And none of them have ever had the American people's interest at heart or our best interests as their goal. Their goal is to stay in power and to line their pockets. So if that's the case, I don't care if it's a red, blue, green, yellow, doesn't matter what is in office. Something behind it is what's running it. And, you're a history buff, many empires have fallen within that 250-year mark. Well, we're coming up on our 250-year mark and we're imploding from within. I travel outside this country. My wife is Portuguese. We've traveled, to Europe. You can't get in or out of some of those countries without a process. Like when we tried to leave Spain, we had to go through 6 security checks, and we happened to stand in the wrong line because we came in from a European country instead of out of country. So we had to go re-stand in the line that allowed us to get out of Spain. Like, you can't do that here. You can just willy-nilly cross north or south border, does not matter. And then you can roam about the country at will. We had to carry our identification and our passports with us to prove that we had a right to be there. And if they tried that here now, there would be so much blowback from it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And then with, I guess I underestimated the welfare usage of illegal immigrants, and then I guess now the massive fraud that is not just in Minneapolis. I mean, I'm hearing Ohio. There's a bunch in Michigan, Maine, California. Obviously, Chicago has always been corrupt. So I mean, I think we're just on the tip of the iceberg, and I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I think Donald Trump being president is probably the only thing that might have saved us. That at least we have a chance now. Before someone like him, who was willing to go against everything, every political power. I mean, he had to first beat the Republican Party, which doesn't, they don't want anyone doing anything that's not out of the ordinary. To the media, to Hollywood, to music. If not for someone who was able to kind of break the system like he has, I mean, I don't think we last much longer. That was all part of the plan, I believe.
And how do you feel in all of that God and religion plays its part to bring that back? Because I don't think there's anyone who says, immigrants shouldn't be here. I think the word illegal is in the title of what everyone is mad about, the illegal part. My wife, when her family came here, it took them 3 years to petition to come here. And then she was sick right before they came as a small child. She was 3. She got meningitis, and they stopped their process. They wouldn't allow them to come here until she was healed and well. And then they were allowed to immigrate here. And then, her and her whole family became citizens of this country, through the process. They went through the process. And I don't think people have a problem with that. I think they have a problem with the illegal part where you are just kind of living off the system, and you are imposing that whatever was in your country now has to be in this country, whether it be the language, the holiday, the greeting, the whatever. Like, you didn't come here to be a part of this country. You came here to have the freedoms you didn't have in your country, but with just bringing that over here. Am I like just the old man get off my lawn guy now, or is there any historical fact in that?
No, I think it really is just that crazy these days. Where the left has gone since even Obama. I mean, you've probably seen all the clips of Bill Clinton and Obama, talking about, well, if you came here legally, we need to remove you. It's very basic stuff. But again, the left has used people's hatred for Donald Trump to just say anything this guy does is horrible and it's a fascist and we got to resist it. But again, that's out of the Marxist playbook. Going back to Henry Marcuse and what is it? Something tolerance, where you tolerate anything on your side, right? So that's why like leftists will support, like right now, Iran, right? Even though it's illegal to be homosexual in Iran, women have no rights, they can't get education. The left will defend that because they're anti-West and they're anti-imperial. So they will allow that and be intolerant of just our own borders, right? Because it's just a power play, and feigning fake outrage is kind of how they control and manipulate the public.
This is and I've taken this stance, and I've lost, dear friends and some family for taking this stand. I do not vote with party line. I vote with who I think is going to do a good job for our country. I voted for Clinton the first time around. Then he proved what he was, and I didn't vote him for the second time around. The same with Donald Trump. I think what people have a problem with is that he is not a politician. He does speak too much. he does do the blowhard bully, I'm the bully on the playground mentality, and any of us who've been bullied see that. But all that aside, I think he's actually trying to do something good for our country. And he went into office saying, I'm going to drain the swamp. Well, anytime, and I don't care in what, take politics out of it, take just natural human behavior. Anytime someone comes in and starts disrupting what is, those that are in the what is get mad about it. And the destructive nature of what he's doing disrupts their comfort and their mask. And so then now everything he does, I fully believe he could give $1 million to every citizen every non-citizen, every person in the world, he could give $1 million to, and people will go, well, it's not 1,000,001,
Yeah.
you know? So
Always
there's
find
just
something.
such blind hatred. Do I agree with everything the man does or says? No. Have I agreed with anything any president has done or said? No. But there's parts of it that I think are working or trying to work. And that's where I don't look at the 30-second soundbite and make my decision. I look at the situation and then go deeper. And I don't go into what the news places here. I've never believed that our news organizations here are going to tell me
Right.
anything. So I get my information outside of that and then I formulate the opinion. And sometimes the opinion is, man, that really sucks. But not everything sucks, right? So there's a little discernment that I think people have lost their mind on. And I'm sure that this episode, when it airs, because we've mentioned Donald Trump, is going to get either shut off or blowback. And, it is what it is. We're not here trying to tout a policy or a politician or red or blue. We're trying to be humans and humanity. And, these are thoughts and feelings that many humans are now afraid to even express because there's such blowback from expressing it. People don't want to lose their friends and their family over any of this, but they also don't want to lose their values in their life either.
Well, that's part of the story though, is that was very political, like 2008 to 2018 or so. And so a lot of that had to do with being in the education system and seeing things change there. I was a very big Ron Paul fan. So like I had basically already rejected the Republican Party. I didn't vote for McCain in '08. I wrote in Ron Paul. I didn't vote for Romney in 2012. I wrote in Ron Paul, or maybe voted for Gary Johnson. I can't remember. And I mean, when Trump started running in 2016, I thought he was a joke. Like I never really paid much attention to him. And I was, a big Rand Paul fan because he was running during that time. And I don't know, whatever the latest, hatred of Trump was, I was just kind of laughing at the media. And I remember one night I was like, they were saying this thing, and I realized Trump did what he did just to get them to look at this thing, right? Like if 10 million illegals came in, he'll say 12 million, and he knows he's wrong, but he's saying it. So then the media will be like, no, oh, Trump's lying again. It wasn't 12 million. It was only 10 million. Right. But then they're repeating that. And then people are like, wait, who cares? 10 million is way too much. Right. And I saw him do this over and over and over again. And then I finally realized, like, oh, he's just playing the media like a yo-yo. And he really is doing the 4 deep chess. I don't care if people believe me or not. I've just seen it happen too many times. But anyways, yeah, I could talk about that stuff all day. And honestly, if anyone out there, I've been trying to get anyone on the left to do a live debate with me for like a decade. Because of course, what do? They name call and they basically throw out, things that just don't make sense, right? Logical fallacies for everybody.
Yeah, and this is what I've had a problem with. I don't think either party is for the American people. I think there's corruption on both sides, and to sit there and say that your side never does it, and then you can go out and find evidence that they did it, and you're like, well, but your side's doing it worse. No, injustice is injustice. Doing it doesn't matter what red or blue. You're both screwing us. Just someone give us dinner. Like, but what I do find, Mike, is that people become zealots on both sides, and then they stop talking. They start yelling, and they want to overpower you with their rightness or their correctness instead of their logic and their actual facts. I've had many discussions with my son who is not staunch anything. He does his research like you do. He's a little bit younger than you, but he's someone who just dives into information. And we'll have discussions where he'll bring up points and I'm like, "Oh, that's actually valid and interesting." And it will get me to change my opinion on something because he's doing it with logic and facts, not name calling and rhetoric. And I think there's a huge difference.
Yeah, and to kind of bring it back to the point is no one's coming to save you, right? Um, and if you're just relying on the government, it's I'm glad we have some sort of a safety net, but it's probably not going to really give you the future that you want. So we always talk about focus on your own economy, right? Like I doubt we're going to stop using the dollar, right? But I know and I believe from studying history is the dollar will continue to lose value like it has for the last 112 years, right? So what am I going to do and what am I going to teach and help people do to take control of their own finances and their own economy? Because we can stop using the dollar. We can start saving in, whatever you want, gold, silver, crypto, Bitcoin. But that's up to you to decide where you want to go and what you believe in. And that's why I get, really passionate about financial literacy is like you said, you do need money, right? It's the love of money is the root of evil, not that money is evil. So keeping that in perspective, having a giving attitude, preserving wealth for your family, for your future, there's nothing wrong with those things, but you have to decide how you want to do it. And to me, it's yes, I think it's smart from a financial sense, but to me, it is more of like a spiritual battle or a political battle. Like I think we are in a war when it comes to ideas, when it comes to money. And so I think when people just blindly just be like, well, I guess I'm going to use the US dollar for everything, I think you're kind of, if you believe anything like we do, I think you're kind of like giving aid to the enemy almost.
So you're in your 40s or 40.
Yep.
Who is the Mike Tharp today versus the Mike Tharp 10 years ago?
Let's see. So, well, 10 years ago, obviously I was working, full-time job. My kids were a lot younger. I was DJing a lot more back then. I was married. So a lot of those things have changed. I would say I've become more decentralized and autonomous. So I still teach and help people. I'm just not inside the school system. Still a father, not married. My boys now are 15 and 13. Amazing, smart, intelligent, kind, caring. Um, so that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. So I'm just trying to enjoy as much time with them. And that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to retire is I saw my dad teach until he was like 62, 63 and then retire. And I was like, do I really want to do that? Like just work, 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 work until I'm in my 60s and then be able to retire and do what I want to do. So being able to take my boys to school, pick them up, help coach their team, stuff like that is what really drove me to, find ways to make money online, find ways to help more people to have that financial freedom.
And what do you want the legacy of this guy to be?
Having fun, not caring what other people think about, and enjoying life.
Mike, you do that. You do that very well. You live life large, and you live it to your terms, which I admire and appreciate. If someone came to you and said, "Mike, I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. How do I get started?" What would you tell those people?
Well, I would first probably, I'd have to ask them some more questions, but I mean, I believe where anyone is at, they can find ways to start putting a little bit money away, even if it's $10 a week. So I would probably ask them questions of like, what are your habits? Like, did you go out to eat last week? Are you buying, coffee from a store every week? Try to find somewhere where we can bring your budget down, even if it's $10 a week. So, I mean, probably one of the easiest ones, right, is you can buy Bitcoin every day or every week automated. So even if it's $10 a week, you know, not anymore, but back in the day, you used to be able to buy an ounce of silver for under $30, right? So if somebody told me they couldn't afford one silver coin a month, I would say, I don't believe you, right? I mean, what is that, like $8 a week? You know, um, now silver's 90ish, so that could be a little more tough. But is just to get started like this, as I've tried to help people, no matter what it is, right? uh, Analysis paralysis and procrastination masturbation. Those are the two things people go to, and everything's got to be perfect until they get started, or they got to analyze this thing over and over and over again. It's like you just got to get started, right? You just got to take that first step, and then you just got to be consistent with it. I mean, there's literally people who have gotten up to one Bitcoin buying $10 a week. I think they started in like 2018. So it's not, we say this all the time. Too many people want to get rich quick. Too many people want to have success, instantly. And if it doesn't happen, then they give up. And those are the two things I see people do over and over and over again that, don't give them success, versus just getting started no matter what, starting small and staying consistent with anything that you're doing, whether it's finances or whatever goals that you want to see happen. So those are like the two things that I try to focus on. Is if there's something that I want to do, I mean, like my first YouTube was deleted, so you can't go back and find them. But I mean, my first videos were horrible, right? But I didn't care, right? Because even then I had that mentality of like, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. I'll get better. I wasn't like, I've literally had people tell me this, right? Like, well, I'll start my podcast and doing lives like when I get this light and I need to get this microphone that's, just ridiculous, like $1,200 or something. And they just use that as like an excuse to not get started on whatever it is. And you see the same in fitness and health. Once I don't have enough money to go to the gym. You can do a full workout at home with nothing, right? But that's just kind of the lies people tell themselves for whatever reason. And that's why a lot of people stay stuck where they're at.
And I think that translates to everything. People want, you talked about the instant, and I find that with whether it be their health, their wealth, their relationship, whatever, they want instant. They don't want to do the work necessary. They don't want to go through the pain necessary, and they want just the instant. And God didn't promise us an easy life. He promised us a way through the hardships. And I heard a long time ago, you shouldn't pray for an easy life. You should pray to be strong enough for the life you're given. And through that is leaning into your beliefs and your connection and whatever. And the rest of that requires the co-creation with that belief. It's not just, oh, pray about it and do nothing. It's pray about it, do your part, the rest happens.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to actually pray for that pain. One of my favorite verses is, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds." And once you kind of like flip that script of, I call it embracing the pain and getting excited about it, is when I really saw my life change. When I stopped getting mad about it and I started laughing about it, of like almost like, are you serious, God? Like you had this happen last week and now this has happened. And you just kind of get to that point where like, okay, I know you're doing this for my betterment. I'm going to accept it. I'm excited that you've put this challenge or obstacle in my way. And I know it's going to make me better. I'm going to come out stronger. When you get that mindset, that's, at least for me, that's when my life completely changed. And I've countless people, that have had success have said a lot of the same things of just embrace the pain and don't look at it as a negative. And when you can change that perspective, I think your whole world changes.
And I think that's spot on accurate. And I appreciate you coming to this show and sharing some of that, insight and this time with us. So I'm grateful for you. I look forward to learning more from you as I get to know you better. And I'm very grateful for people like you. So thanks, Mike.
Yeah, Daryl, great to be on. We could probably talk for another 5 hours, but hopefully people got some inspiration out of this. And I guess I would just leave it of just get started, guys. No matter how small, no matter, what it feels like today, it might seem insignificant, but just start taking those baby steps, and have a curious mind, get educated about stuff. We didn't even really get into blockchain, right? I'll just give you guys a little tip here. The number one blockchain I'm excited about right now is called Tau, TAO, or BitTensor. I think it's going to be huge for AI. It's a decentralized AI, which is, to me, really important, unless we want to end up like, the Terminator, where the robots take over. We need to be very careful about how we're accepting AI, how we're using it, how it's built. I think to safeguard the future as well. That's a whole other podcast right there. But you can basically find me anywhere. Michael Tharp EDU is kind of the name. So Twitter, YouTube. He's got it all. Awesome.
Yep. If you want to connect with Mike, you can do so at Facebook on his Facebook group pages, The Runners, Instagram, YouTube, X, and you can find all of his stuff on Linktree. So you can be sure that he's out there and he can get you handled. So Mike, again, this door is open. We can come back in and fill another couple hours and do it more on the finance stuff. But I wanted people to get to know you and who you are and part of your journey as well. So, I just appreciate that.
Awesome. Great to be on, Daryl. Happy to come back again, brother.
Thank you. And I'm going to put this back up here so that, if you do want to connect with Mike, find him on these. That link tree is a really great spot to find all of his stuff. And then, as always, thank you for joining us on this edition of A Warrior Spirit. We're now on all the major platforms, as well as on Roku via the Prospera TV app and at breakthroughradio.net. So be sure to like or subscribe to catch all the episodes. As always, the journey is sacred, the warrior is you. So remember to be inspired, be empowered, and embrace the spirit of the warrior within.
It's not just about the fight, it's how we rise from it.